also when talking about like stereotypes that we see of women, what exactly are they? I think before you can even understand how they're impacting women on a day-to-day basis, actually believing that those stereotypes exist. There's a huge denial still. And I think that's the part where trying to even answer that question almost seems like, duh, how can you,
Right.
how can you still be, questioning how it impacts people in their day-to-day life, when I think the really big thing is you're still wasting a lot of time typically for the average woman discussing or trying to verify with people that these are actually legitimate concerns or actual pressures that are impacting people. So
welcome to the Scaries, brought to you by Racer Co. I'm Sky.
And I'm Talitha. We are proudly broadcasting from Treaty 4 territory, and in each episode we tackle the alarming, inconceivable, questionable, shocking, and scary statistics relating to, impacting, and intervening with the lives of women and girls worldwide.
You'll hear the scary truth, take away tools and tips, and learn about what you can do about it. And really, the Scaries is an opportunity to use your voice as women and supporters of women to make real change. As always, the Scaries is our opinions and for entertainment purposes only. So please do take it with a grain of salt. And we could be sharing some content that could be triggering for you. So please do listen with caution.
As straight, cisgender, white, able-bodied settler women, we are aware of the privilege that we have, and we want to use this platform to spread awareness about the scary reality that women from around the world face in different life situations.
Why?
Because sometimes nothing is scarier than being a woman. Hello, hello, hello. Today we're discussing a topic that I hold near to my heart, which is mental health and the associated stigma, especially impacting women in Canada. I know that we have a trigger warning at the beginning. This is another trigger warning that we are talking about mental health issues, mental health stigmas. So if this is something that impacts you or that you feel like you need support in, or that you're maybe just going to be triggered by, then please save this episode for another day. Don't listen. We won't take offense. Protect yourself first. I have openly discussed my mental health, maybe not directly on this podcast, but definitely in other aspects of our work with Raise Her Co. And I do that specifically because, like anything, the more we talk about topics that are stigmatized, the more we can reduce the stigma and give back power to folks. I know I come from a place of privilege because I have a very supportive partner and family and friends and a work wife here. And I also have access to healthcare and medication and other supports. And I've also not been openly discriminated against. I mean, I say openly because, I don't know, maybe behind my back, but not to my face, against me for living with depression and anxiety. And so I know that I'm a lucky one. I'm very aware of that. I'm also loud enough and not scared to chat about my health. So here we go. But imagine this. Nearly half of Canadians feel unsure about hanging out with a friend who's dealing with mental health issues. And only half of us would openly talk about having a family member or friend with mental illness compared to talking about cancer.
Wow.
Yeah. There's just such a stigma.
Wow.
Mental health stigma hits women especially hard. Among other issues, gender bias has a significant negative effect on medical diagnosis and the quality of healthcare women receive, leading to substantial delays in diagnosis and even misdiagnosis. This includes delays in receiving mental health care, as research has found that women experience depression and anxiety twice as often as men, but experience more barriers in getting care. Throughout this episode, we're going to dig into why mental health stigma impacts and affects women differently and what we can do to help break down those barriers.
All right. So are we ready to dive into the inequities?
No, I really don't want to. Do we have to?
Well, yeah, I think we do, because it's kind of why we're here and what we're all about at the Scaries. So let's dig in. First, did you know that there is not a specific Women's Mental Health Awareness Month, despite the fact that there is a Men's Mental Health Month occurring every June? Why am I not surprised?
Why?
But sadly, that's the fact. However, there is a Women's Mental Health Awareness Week. So we got 1 week, which occurs
7 days
right around Mother's Day. So... I mean,
Perfect.
I get the combination.
Just lump it all together. You're like, if you're a mom, if you have a mom, if you know a mom, and you know anyone with mental health, just celebrate it all in one.
Yeah.
I mean, it does go hand in hand, I guess.
I mean,
still.
Yeah, it's not easy being a mom, so I understand the challenges, but why not a month? What the heck?
Yeah.
And so really the importance of these months or weeks really is highlighting the significance of bringing awareness to the continued education to women's mental health and poor access or quality of care that women face when seeking help for their mental health concerns. But first, let's define mental health, because that's how we always like to start with all the definitions are on the same page. So the World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and can make a contribution to their community. Seems like a lot of things.
I was like,
It's like a solid sound human.
I don't know if anyone is.
I don't know about that. Yeah. State of well-being. So basically, can cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively, and make a contribution to the community. That's a lot.
And fruitfully too, whatever they define as fruitfully.
Yes. So I would say that's a very strong mental health picture that we all strive for, but I don't know if we have every day. So when we discuss mental health issues or illness or struggles within mental health, we're referring to the incapacity or difficulty being in this healthy mental state that the definition describes for a sustained period. So while a lot has been done in the past decade to help bring more awareness of what it can mean to live with or support someone who's struggling with mental illness, for those dealing with mental health disorders, stigma still exists, as we discussed. The reality is that many people still, including myself, I could lump myself into that too, just don't know how to react or respond or what to say to offer help.
Right. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people don't know how to offer help and support and all of that sort of thing. But what differentiates how women and men navigate mental health? Structural inequities within the Canadian healthcare system exacerbate gender-based disparities in mental health care. Despite Canada's universal healthcare system, mental health services such as counseling, psychotherapy, and substance use treatments are not covered unless deemed medically necessary. That's a quote unquote medically necessary, leading individuals to rely on limited insurance benefits or pay out of pocket, or none of the above because people can't afford it. And then, of course, on top of that, women face unique factors that make us more susceptible to mental health challenges. Of course.
Oh, of course, as always.
So let's review 4 of the most prominent factors. First, there are the economic factors. Women facing poverty are more likely to experience poor mental health, with 29% of women in poverty experiencing a common mental health disorder compared to just 16% of women not in poverty. Also, women in poverty who have experienced abuse are even more likely to experience poor mental health.
And there's a lot.
There's tons. Yeah. We've done the stats on it.
Yes. Check out the episode list.
Yeah. Next is that hormones and life stages is another big one. So there are major mental health issues that can develop surrounding a woman or menstruators' fluctuations in hormones throughout their period cycle, which is even more heightened during pregnancy and menopause. So specifically looking at menstruation, which I don't know, you're for 50 years, 60 years. I don't know how long people menstruate for, but that's a long time.
I mean, sadly. Sadly and not sadly, but whatever. It's not fun.
No. So approximately 75% of menstruating individuals experience some form of PMS symptoms, which can include mood swings, irritability, anxiety, and depression. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD, impacts around 3 to 8% of menstruating individuals and is a severe form of PMS characterized by more intense mood disturbances. And I feel like PMS gets such a people are like, oh, I'm just PMSing, or like, oh, she's PMSing, or they're PMSing. And it's like, no, but they're dealing with a really intense mood swing. And
and it's the hormones that we can't control, and you don't know what you're going to get every morning you wake up.
Literally, it's hard. Yeah. It's hard out there being a menstruator. Next is pregnancy. So about 10 to 15% of pregnant individuals experience symptoms of depression during pregnancy. This can vary, and some individuals may be at a higher risk based on factors such as a history of depression or stressful life events. Postpartum depression affects approximately 10 to 20% of women within the first year after giving birth. And anecdotally, I know that a lot of people that I've talked to who have been diagnosed with postpartum depression were like, I had no idea that I was in it until I was deep in it, and then I got diagnosed, and it's
For
just
sure. How would you? I mean, if you never had it and you have a new baby to care for, you don't know again.
Yeah.
It's a twilight zone in general.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And when I was pregnant, I developed a heart palpitation because my anxiety was so insane. My body was literally like, okay, we need to calm down. And it would be it would just keep, it was crazy. I feel
going through some big things.
Oh man.
Mind, body, mental, everything.
It's crazy. Okay, and then last is menopause. So some women may experience mood swings, anxiety, and irritability during perimenopause, the transition period leading up to menopause. The prevalence varies, but it is estimated that around 20% of women may experience significant mood swings. The risk of depression and anxiety can increase during and after menopause. It is estimated that 20 to 40% of women may experience depressive symptoms during this phase.
Wow, that's a big number. 20 to 40%?
Like nearly half? If you're at the top end of that?
It's so sad how we don't hear enough about menopause.
No.
But yet it's something that all women go through.
Yeah.
Huge life milestone. But until recently, I haven't heard anyone really talk about menopause. Not even my own mom. Like it's just maybe a hot flash here and there. But like there's no talking about the mental health aspects of it. Never hear about it.
No. And it's really, really heavy. And like a few people that I have now heard talk about it, they're like, this is no joke. Like it's hard. So the third factor is childcare. So, and I mean, obviously those who have children, but specifically women deal with it. So women are also more likely to be responsible for raising children than men. This means that they may not be able to find adequate childcare services that otherwise allow them to seek mental health treatment. A study from 2018 reported that nearly 1 in 4 women could not get the care they needed because they could not take time off of work. Furthermore, 1 in 4 women shared that they either postponed care or missed it altogether due to costs. So like you can't get away from work, or you can't find someone to take care of your kid to then go to your session to have it, or you're going to like not get paid. So
right. Go. Barriers on barriers on barriers. All the reasons why.
Yeah. Lastly, there are healthcare obstacles. Even though it is true that the stigma surrounding mental health issues has faded over time, women are still more likely to encounter negative stigmas and stereotypes relating to their mental health than men, particularly when it comes to addiction. Also, women are more likely to have a harder time integrating primary care services with their mental health treatment plan. Both providers and patients have to keep these barriers in mind when it comes to providing women with access to mental health treatments to ensure that everyone receives the right care.
So now that we've heard about some of the barriers, those aren't even all the barriers, those are just the heavy hitters. Let's chat about how mental health differs between genders and the associated scaries with that. So first, sex and gender play crucial roles in shaping mental health and mental illness. Of course, sex refers to your biological distinction between male and female, while gender is the social role and behaviors typically associated with men, women, and gender diverse or gender nonconforming folks. So those two things are very different. The emergence of mental health challenges typically involves a combination of genetic factors and the individual's experiences and societal roles, so their gender. These factors interact differently based on gender, influencing the development of mental health issues. Research indicates that significant gender disparities in the prevalence and manifestation of common mental health disorders such as eating disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety are there. And by delving into the root causes of gender differences in mental health, we can enhance the accuracy of diagnosing mental health conditions and tailor treatment options more effectively, ultimately benefiting more people. But which mental health conditions are women more susceptible to?
That's
I wonder.
Great question. Let's unpack these for you and the reasons why women face these more. So first, depression. Twice as many women experience depression at some point in their lives when compared to men. Gender, genetic, social, and economic differences, as Skylar said, all play a role in the development of depression in women. Major depressive disorder actually accounts for a significant amount of disability worldwide. Depressive disorders account for more than 40% of disability in women. In men, they account for just under 30% of disability. Next is anxiety. So anxiety is another very common mental health issue, one that women are twice as likely to experience as men. Testosterone, which is typically found in higher amounts in men than women, has been found to have antidepressant and anti-anxiety benefits.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How nice for them.
I know, like built in. Also, women are more likely to seek help for anxiety than men. This may contribute to a higher diagnosis rate in women, which makes sense. I guess you're like, I have worries all the time. And so then you go and seek it out versus men might just suck it up. Next is PTSD. Women experience trauma that often leads to negative mental health effects, particularly post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Studies show that women are 2 to 3 times more likely than men to suffer from PTSD. This increased risk in women is partly due to their higher likelihood of experiencing sexual assault, which is strongly linked to PTSD. However, even when exposed to similar traumas, women still have a greater risk of developing PTSD than men. Possible reasons for this gender difference include the fact that women often experience trauma within established relationships or face ongoing interpersonal violence, such as domestic abuse, which we heard in our very first episode. Additionally, women's roles as wives, mothers, or caretakers may exacerbate the impact of trauma, as traumatic experiences can interfere with their ability to fulfill these roles, causing additional stress. A vicious cycle.
Totally. Oh, man. Well, let me give you some more. We're not done
Perfect.
now. Dementia is another one. So as age increases, so does the risk of dementia. And because women have a higher life expectancy compared to men, they are more likely to be diagnosed. In fact, in 2020, an estimated 61.8% of persons living with dementia in Canada were female.
Wow.
And more than half of care partners were women.
That's crazy.
By 2050, projections show that over 1 million women will be living with dementia in Canada.
Oh my goodness.
Really interesting. Eating disorders is another one. And this one doesn't surprise me, unfortunately, but eating disorders impact women much more than men. Eating disorders involve obsessive thoughts and behaviors that are associated with food, body weight, and appearance. And they represent a significant mental health issue because they can occur in tandem with other conditions, including depression and anxiety. So they just layer and layer and layer. The majority of individuals who struggle with anorexia and bulimia are women. More than half of individuals who develop binge eating disorders are women as well. According to a study of Massachusetts middle school students, so that's like grades 6 to 8, I think, in middle school, an estimated 6% of girls use disordered weight control behavior monthly, including vomiting and taking laxatives to control their weight.
That's so sad.
So sad. While there are no definitive causes, research has shown that genetic, behavioral, psychological, social, and cultural factors all contribute to the development of an eating disorder. Low self-esteem, as well as feeling pressure to lose weight, are often reported as factors in patients with eating disorders. Not to mention the media.
I was going to say, yeah. The media is definitely the biggest culprit.
For sure. So the next one is suicide. Women are more likely to attempt suicide, even though men are more likely to complete suicide. Women who reported having a higher physical manifestation of symptoms were more likely to attempt suicide again after their first attempt as well. It's important to note that just because someone may not complete suicide does not mean that they will not continue to struggle with lifelong complications as a result. That one gives me tingles and shivers.
Yeah, that's really heartbreaking. And if you have any ideations or anything, we will put some resources in the show notes, but please note that we are not experts in this. So please connect with an expert if you have or are dealing with any of the mental health struggles that we just listed. Moving on to demographics. When we look specifically at different demographics and intersectionalities, as we love to do, we unsurprisingly see even greater disparities and challenges for individuals who face repeated discrimination. In certain cultural contexts, mental health remains a taboo topic, particularly for people of color who may associate it with historical experiences of colonization and control. Historically, the Black community has been placed at a disadvantage when it comes to their mental health, given their subjection to trauma through enslavement, oppression, colonialism, racism, and segregation, much of which extends to the experience of mental health care and equity today. In fact, based on a report from 2018, 38.3% of Black Canadian residents with poor or fair self-reported mental health used mental health services compared to 50.8% of white Canadian residents. And from that very same survey of 328 Black Canadian residents, 35.4% were experiencing significant psychological distress, with 60% saying that they would be more willing to use mental health services if the health professional were Black.
I believe it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Moving to another intersection, according to Mental Health Research Canada, young women under 25 disproportionately experience high levels of anxiety, stress, and depression, often refraining from seeking mental health assistance due to financial constraints or lack of insurance coverage, as we went over at the beginning. Suicide rates among females have surpassed those of males in the 10 to 14 age group. over the past decade, with girls being 6 times more likely to develop generalized anxiety disorder than boys, and a notable increase in major depressive episodes among girls aged 13 and older compared to boys. Through conversations with young women experiencing mental illness and frontline mental health care providers, it is evident that young women and girls encounter specific obstacles in accessing and navigating the system, often feeling powerless and dependent on privilege for recovery. Young women describe needing to reach crisis levels to receive necessary care within the acute care system, lacking community-based support upon discharge, and facing gender-based stereotypes and biases when seeking help, such as being labeled as overdramatic.
Oh my goodness.
Additionally, research indicates that gender-based stigma contributes to the perception of young women as attention-seeking or manipulative when expressing suicidal ideation, leading to inadequate support systems. Community-based initiatives focusing on mental health promotion, such as social and emotional learning and body-positive comprehensive sexuality education, have proven effective in reducing bullying and improving self-esteem by challenging toxic masculinity and harmful gender stereotypes. However, the current supply of such programs is insufficient to meet growing demand.
Not to mention, we just had a little thing called COVID-19, and I mean, it's still around. So how does that had an impact? Well, we all know, we all are hearing more and more the heightened impact it had. So as many of us witnessed and even experienced, there were so many factors and problems that layered on each other during COVID that were problematic for our mental health. Mental health providers all over the world saw an increase in inquiries for care. Through recent research, it's clear the pandemic had a terrible impact on women's mental health specifically. According to a research study from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Canada, women have higher levels of anxiety and loneliness than men. Specifically, nearly 25% of women indicated they were struggling with moderate to severe anxiety compared to just under 18% of men, and more than 23% of women indicated severe feelings of loneliness when compared to just over 17% of men. Another study published at the end of 2020 found that women were reporting more frequent and more severe symptoms of anxiety and depression. Also, women's symptoms got worse over time compared to men. Women also reported higher levels of empathy and emotional understanding than men. Interesting.
Yeah.
But this greater empathy was closely tied to worsening anxiety and depression and trauma. They're caring about everyone else getting sick, and then it just makes them even more upset and more depressed.
Wow.
To boil it all down, what we're saying here is there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, but just as a result of the pandemic, especially as we deal with all this aftermath, there is more work to be done. This trauma does not go away, even though the pandemic has seemingly kind of died down. It's still there. So what do we do about it? Well, let's chat with our guest.
Let's chit-chat.
So as we mentioned in some of our statistics, gender needs to continue to be a considered factor when we can look at mental health, and from understanding the risk levels to the treatment of the conditions. So through education and destigmatizing these efforts, we can all do our part to help women better understand their mental health and seek help if they need it. Which brings us to our guest today, Miss Vibya Natana. Welcome, Vibya.
Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Let me tell you a little bit about this lady. So Vibya is a South Sudanese Canadian social worker based in Treaty 4 territory. She works in the mental health care and community development sectors, advancing the missions of several organizations both professionally and as an avid volunteer. Vibya is passionate about building capacity within marginalized communities by increasing access to educational opportunities and developing inclusive systems through policy advocacy and community-based programming. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so happy to have Vibya.
Yeah.
We've been connected with her for a while, and she's always so inspiring whenever we listen to you. So we're super excited to have you on the pod.
Thank you.
On the old pod.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we always start off with a couple of rapid fire questions. So we'll get right into it. This is just to like get you warmed up. Everyone, I feel like people get nervous about this, but honestly, it's just a conversation. So to start off, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So as girls, I feel like we give each other advice from like starting from kindergarten.
Yeah.
Like it's always, there's so much stuff. And I feel like it has to come from my girlfriends. And like one of the biggest ones is just definitely around, oh, how did she put it? It went something like the problems are not on your back, just they're on the table. And yeah, and it's, yeah. And I can't remember what crisis or micro crisis was going on at the time. I think it came out of like something in high school. And essentially it was just kind of this idea of like, okay, like you're really internalizing all of the things that you're going through right now. And they matter, they're significant, but at the same time, they're not an extension of you or a reflection of your character or anything like that. Like they're just on the table, right? And when they're on the table, we can all look at them objectively. We can work on them. You can slice them up, dice them, whatever, right? So that's something where I don't even know if she realized the magnitude. Shout out to Mwila for sharing that. But yes, yeah. But that's always stuck with me. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's such a
deep.
good way of thinking of it.
And she was saying it in like a funny way. It was funny at the time, but like now I'm like, oh man, like that's so real. So.
Well, and it sticks with you too, especially when things are like, as you get older, things get heavier, they seem. And so if you're like actually carrying them and weighing them, they like just get even heavier.
And we'll talk about that because then the weight in your shoulders, the shoulders are, there's a lot. There's a lot in it. But
I like that. I really do like that.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. If you could grant one gift to all women, what would it be?
Somewhere in between just no questions asked days off when you're not feeling your best.
Oh,
and like somewhere in between that. And then I think also just access to education. I think that's the biggest one where it's just on a general level. One gift I think would just be not even having to consider it as being something to put on the back burner because of feeling like you wouldn't be supported in different realms or all those different types of things. So I think that would be it.
Yeah. I love those. Yeah. Two things we have not heard yet.
No, those are both brand new.
Yeah. And very
that.
Significant. So
honestly, I feel like sometimes, as much as like the movie is not very good, like Click, that movie Click with Adam Sandler, where he could like pause, fast forward, rewind, whatever his movie.
Yeah.
I just feel like sometimes where I'm like, I just need a day to like sleep and watch trash TV, but I don't want to miss anything. And like I have all these other responsibilities and all of that. And so, yeah, I mean, I would definitely take up your first gift. Yeah. Hands down.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Okay. Last but not least, what is your scary?
Oh, man. I feel like it's the combination of multiple oppressions because it can feel like once you've tackled one thing, you still have other aspects of your identity that might still play a factor in just how you're perceived in the world. And then I think also the aspect of just it being out of your control in a lot of spaces. What might matter in one space doesn't matter in another one. And yeah, just like I think the lack of control around how you might be received based on who you are is definitely can be scary. Does it keep me up at night on a regular basis? I think the more that I'm able to talk about it in settings like this and like that kind of thing, less and less. I'm trying to get to bed early. I have a life to live. So
yeah. So. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Totally. And there could be so many layers, which it feels like you can never get out from it, right?
But it's definitely been nice as well, I think, to when you find more and more spaces, or at least in Saskatchewan, I think for a lot of us, it's create those spaces for yourself where you can just show up as being you for at least for the most part. Really makes things a lot less scary to the point where sometimes you forget, right? That some of these things are still such a major issue. Because side story, I remember going back home to South Sudan for the first time in a really long time. And I think just seeing even the experiences of some of my counterparts, of like my cousins who are same age as me or like similar, and their day-to-day experiences and how they live their life and the responsibilities that they have versus myself. Then it's no longer necessarily being Black is not even now on the table. It's being a woman, being a South Sudanese woman in that space, right? So it's just, interesting.
Yeah. So circumstantial and Okay. Now what we call going into the nitty gritty. In your bio, we talked a little bit about that you work in the mental health sector. Can you just provide a little brief overview of what that looks like and your place of work and what your role is and all that kind of stuff?
For sure. Yeah. So I'm really proud to be one of the staff members at the online therapy unit, which has been around since 2010. I'm delivering online therapy courses, which teach individuals about managing symptoms of anxiety and depression through online courses. But then they also get to access therapist support through the program as well. So it's been really cool getting to be part of that team, especially starting out in my career as well, and getting to not only learn about all of the different aspects of mental health that people are dealing with in our province and also around the country as well, but also just, I think, getting to really understand what brings people to seeking mental health services as well. And got to talk to so many different people within my role as well, and really helping understand like exactly what brings people to that stage of being able to seek help has been just very transformative transformative, I think, for me as well, just because I'm also at this stage of life where it's like major life transitions in your early 20s, trying to figure out life back to back to back, and getting to hear other people's stories about how they navigate a lot of things has kind of really, I think that comes back to that aspect before of what we were talking about with the scaries and things that keep you up at night. I think for me, really recognizing how there's some really common threads that people experience across the board, whether you're a woman, man, just having family concerns, all these different types of things. At the core of it, there's a lot of really similar things. People want to be understood. They want to, feel seen in spaces. They want to feel respected, and all those types of things tend to come up in so many forms. And I think that's the biggest aspect of this work that really gets me excited, is just really like understanding how people's motivations and very, very simple things can influence their entire lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Is this program something that anyone in Saskatchewan can access, and what's the cost?
So it's free. The cost
Woohoo!
is $0.
$0.
Yeah, which is, it's really amazing as well. Yeah, that it gets to be offered for free. And when it comes to then eligibility, there are some eligibility requirements as well. And, it kind of varies depending on the course that you're looking at taking. But essentially, it's offered for adults. So that's one of the aspects. Also, there's some other criteria as well that will help determine whether or not it's the right fit for you at this time. But all of that information is really easily accessible, both on the website and also by giving us a call during work hours or after hours right now. So, don't call.
Don't call.
Yeah. But the eligibility criteria as well, aside from just being able to access this program, we also really take the time as well to discuss other options if it isn't the right fit for individuals as well, to being able to help them navigate a system that we know it can be complicated for a lot of people seeking mental health services as well.
And I think talking about the scaries, it can be scary to navigate as well, and to be vulnerable in a place where you're like, I think I need help, and not knowing where to go. So yeah, if you're in that state and you want to take a course, go to where Vibya works.
My question is, how do you know, maybe you don't know, but how many people typically like a year go through your programs?
It's up there. It's up there. Yeah. In terms of the specific numbers, I definitely have to get back to you with exactly where that's at. But definitely thousands of people have been taking this program since its inception. And when it comes to just seeing those numbers within Saskatchewan, I can say that it's definitely on the rise, as we're seeing that there's such a need for people to be finding accessible mental health care services and that sort of thing. Yeah, definitely daily we're reviewing the numbers in terms of people seeking these services and all of that. So the numbers are unfortunately quite high. But at the same time, I think the positive aspect of it is people are reaching out for these services, right? And the majority of individuals that are seeking these services, it's by force. These are individuals who are seeking it out of their own free will, looking for the supports and the information as well. So
well, it's nice that it's timely too, because we talk a lot about how people who struggle with mental health, there's so many barriers to get timely support. It's like you're on a waiting list for months and months and months, and you can't talk to anyone, and by that time it could be too late, in some cases. So that's super amazing that you can get the support. And it's a program, it's education. It's not just one-on-one, but it's like, let us give you the tools to then navigate this throughout the rest of your life.
Exactly.
So I love that. Awesome. Okay. So what drew you to want to become involved in this line of work?
I would say that in a lot of ways, community work has always been central to all of the different things that I've gotten to be involved with over the years, whether as volunteer or now in more professional capacities. But I think one of the biggest parts is just like a love for people and wanting to see people feel and do well, feel well, and be able to be in a space where the things that you even want to achieve are succeeding because the people you're working with are also well too, right? And that plays such a big factor in it. And I think in the last few years, whether within university or even just beforehand, doing a lot of things at a community level with groups and organizations has been really interesting, especially with our team at Black and Sask and getting to do a lot of that kind of work with large groups. But I think one of the things that comes with working with groups, whether community dynamics with other individuals and that kind of thing, is you start to recognize how important that aspect of the individual's well-being is, and how when individuals are not well, how that impacts the quality of work that you do, a level of impact you're able to have when doing community work. I'm sure two of you can attest to the weight that comes from taking on community-facing projects, especially as women as well. And I think then for me, being able to then take this opportunity to really take a step into, okay, yes, there's still community work that I'm doing and all of that kind of stuff, but coming down to the individual level and really understanding people at that base, like I think that's just really helped me understand my role in the community a lot better, just from that one-on-one aspect of, okay,
Right.
this is what individuals at the base level care about, right? They care about the connectedness, they care about being seen and all those things. And then as a community worker, I guess then I can be like, okay, how is my work making space for the individual? Am I, like, you're taking stock of it? Like, am I really, I say that I care about people's well-being. Am I really being that flexible in how I operate certain things? And you can start to reevaluate that. And even for myself, I would say that in terms of taking care of myself, really being attentive to that, and just like what seems like very minor details has just really taken flight, I think, since like working with individuals one-on-one and seeing that demonstrated by the amazing team that I get to work with every day as well. So
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we've heard so many times that like you need to put your oxygen mask on first before you can assist other people. You need to fill your own cup before you can pour into others. And so much of that becomes true, especially as you're doing community work, as you said, and you're giving of yourself so much. Yeah. And then another thing that popped into my head was that like long gone are the days where you leave who you are outside of work at the door. It's now people are bringing their whole selves. And sometimes that includes mental health things that are happening or whatever. And so understanding how to navigate those things is so important, and how to support people through different aspects of their lives.
100%. And I think I started to recognize it on a more personal level even this year as well, and recognizing that the way that I was starting to show up in community and the weight of it was starting to impact how I was showing up at work on a negative level. And again, having supportive teams of women leaders, and like I can't stress this enough in terms of how much of an impact that's made on my career and how I've seen myself. But I think that I'm fortunate to be able to be in that space, because I recognize that that's not the same for everyone. For a lot of other people, that kind of shift in terms of how you're showing up can lead to a lot of really serious consequences, especially if there's lack of understanding about, well, we're working in a mental health setting, right? But not all of them are the same. Not all of them even recognize those as being legitimate concerns. But I think for me, when I was seeing that, the way that I was carrying, whether experiences that are happening in the community with anti-Black racism, or as a board member with YWCA, of course, the work that they're doing with women who are seeking supports and fleeing domestic violence and all of that kind of stuff. I think you're doing all of that, and sometimes it's at a arm's length kind of role, or sometimes it's one-on-one on the ground. And I didn't realize how much I was carrying. I think that was kind of shocking, because typically it had been kind of like you're carrying all the information and you're just running with it, and things are just being processed on the fly. And then when it started to show up for me and I had to have conversation, at work, and talking about, okay, I think that there's something going on here. I think for me, that was a huge wake up call.
Wow.
I never expected to, because I'm usually in the other seat.
Yeah,
I'm usually helping people navigate and being that person for a lot of people. So for me to be able to recognize the importance of really just being able to practice what I preach, essentially, right? I think that really changed a lot of the way that I started to show up. And again, I think the original question was, why? Why did I get involved? I think a lot of it was also for myself as well. Like in terms of getting involved in mental health care, it's caring for people. But I think at the same time, a lot of it too is it's the full circle aspect. Better community for my old self, for future versions of myself, for other people who are like me, which is everybody as a person, we're all connected in that sense as well. So
absolutely. Yeah. I like totally deviated from the original question, but I was like, here we go. Anyways, let's go along for the ride. Yeah. So we talked a lot about kind of like the gendered differences that exist, specifically for women or gender nonconforming, gender diverse people. So from your perspective, what are some of the mental health challenges that tend to impact gender diverse folks, women, gender nonconforming, disproportionately compared to men?
Well, I think off the top of my head, the eating disorders aspect is a really big one. But I think that also the connection to aspects of anxiety and depression, but how it shows up differently for those groups is a lot more significant in terms of a lot of the other mental health disorders and different things like that tend to show up for people in so many different groups. But then when it comes to the impact for gender diverse and women, specifically identifying people, I think that aspect too of just like recognizing as well that their identity plays such a huge role in how they experience those things. Because it's one thing to just look at the list of symptoms and be like, okay, well, you're crying a lot more, you're oversleeping, and all of these different types of things. But then also what that is then labeled as, and when you go out into the world, for example, for a woman who's experiencing like all of a sudden uncontrollable crying in a workplace setting when you're CEO running a large team and that sort of thing is taken a lot differently, I would say, than other individuals, right? And just like seeing how that gets layered plays such a huge role as well. So I think that's a really big factor. Yeah, one of the other things too, I would say, is also just when it comes to the pressures in the media is a really big aspect of it as well. And just, again, like how things are labeled in terms of taking people seriously as well when it comes to a lot of these issues. Because these days, I think like a big trend as well when it comes to vulnerability on social media too is definitely like, oh, people are just doing it for clout. People are sharing how emotional things are and revealing those aspects of themselves to either gain sympathy points and that kind of thing. And it's belittled in a lot of ways. And I think for a lot of women and people who are trying to seek supports, it's already more just like, it's already so challenging. It's already so challenging to reach out, and then to be belittled in that kind of way just adds an extra weight to it. So I think that aspect is pretty significant as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just curious, in the program and the people that you work with at work, is there more women or the same amount as women and men who come to seek your services?
I would say that there's more women.
But more women, okay.
Yeah, there's more women. And I think that a big aspect too is, so when you hear a lot of individuals who are reaching out, and oftentimes they're reaching out for the first time for any type of mental health service, sometimes it's the first time they've ever admitted out loud that they've been experiencing any type of mental health challenges. For a lot of women who've been used to, like we were joking a little bit before about girls have been giving advice to each other and kind of like using all this therapy speak from a really young age, consulting each other on our feelings and all of that kind of stuff. But we are socialized to be more open about our feelings from a young age and think about things from that aspect of, how are you feeling about a certain situation, and really taking all of that into consideration. For a lot of other individuals, whether men or gender diverse folks, even finding the space to be able to vocalize a lot of those things, it's not happening. It's not possible for a lot of people in their current realities, especially when you add into the factor things like living in a small town, for example. A lot of people from rural communities reaching out for these services as well. So in terms of that aspect, I think for women, just already having the access to language to describe how they're feeling, that can be a bit easier for individuals.
Interesting.
As well.
So how do societal expectations and gender roles really contribute? We talked a little bit about this, but how do those things contribute to the unique stressors for women, and how does that influence our mental health?
So I think that one of the big things with this is definitely just understanding what the pressures are themselves. So when talking about like stereotypes that we see of women, what exactly are they? I think before you can even understand how they're impacting women on a day-to-day basis, actually believing that those stereotypes exist. There's a huge denial still. And I think that's the part where trying to even answer that question almost seems like, duh, how can you, how can you still be, questioning how it impacts people in their day-to-day life, when I think the really big thing is you're still wasting a lot of time typically for the average woman discussing or trying to verify with people that these are actually legitimate concerns or actual pressures that are impacting people. So again, whether it's how people are expected to show up in their homes, balancing the weight of responsibilities at home with work and other caregiving responsibilities as well for extended family and friends and all of that. I think that aspect really impacts people because on one hand, when it comes to dealing with feelings of worry and all of that kind of stuff, a big part of it for women, especially starting from a young age, is how are people going to perceive me? Am I being a good enough sister, friend, whatever it is to everybody else in my life? That really shows up for people a lot. And I think it's discussed a lot more than people maybe realize, is the weight of your responsibilities in relationship to other people seems to show up. And then when you're trying to get someone to then, okay, but then how is it impacting you? You realize that, oh, like you spent so much time, and this has even been for myself as well. You spent so much time reflecting on, your responsibilities to other people, how you're showing up for other people, not necessarily considering the impact to yourself. And then on the other hand as well, when it comes to then the sadness of it as well, I think for some people, it's even difficult to identify that you're feeling sad about it because of oftentimes that sense of disappointment is just so focused on yourself and just, again, like you being a failure, you not necessarily showing up for people as best as you could. So I think that plays a big, big role for a lot of people for sure.
That's huge. I think I was reading a book, I don't know, last year. It's called The Burnout Effect. And it's all about how women specifically are the caretakers. And that's the stereotypical caretakers. And we are, I mean, a lot of women, not all, but they also take that on as just, that's who we are. Like
your role that you're supposed to have.
Yeah. And so when you are that and you don't do it well, or you think you don't do it well, and all the pressures to do it well with so many people in your lives, your children, your parents, your siblings, your friends, everyone, it gets exhausting and it weighs on you, even if you're not doing anything else but taking care of other people. And it's the stereotype, it's that gender role that women are expected to do that because we bear children, we are supposed to be taking care of people, we're the nurturers, right? So totally aligns with what you just said. That's what just flagged in my brain, is that no wonder we have such pressure. And
as a recovering people pleaser, everything that you just said, I was like, oh yeah, I take it on myself. I take on all of those things. Yeah. And like, it is now my responsibility to make sure everyone else is having a good time. Like as a hostess for like a party, I very rarely eat or have any time because I'm like, are you having fun? Because if you're not having fun, it is now my fault and I need to do something about it. You know, it's just like, that's how I approach life too often. And imagine what that does to a person, Vibya.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like everything, even the not eating, I think about how many great event foods that I have not eaten out of self-sacrifice for absolutely no reason. And I'm just like, dang, like RIP to those like appetizers that I could have enjoyed at all these events.
Yeah, like why are you being a martyr? Nobody asked you to be.
Nobody asked. Yeah.
So you talked a lot about the different roles that women play, but there's also, and we also had kind of addressed this already, but considering just the different intersectionalities that exist. So how do factors such as race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status, for example, intersect with gender to affect women's mental health differently?
Yeah, so if you've ever seen that like very classic anti-racism image that's used where it's like three people standing on boxes and there's this fence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there's that whole like idea of like okay,
equity, equality, justice. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it really comes down to like that kind of perception on it. And if you haven't seen that image, go search up like fence racism poster and I'm sure something similar. Something similar will come up. But I think even more than that, like it's just kind of that aspect of recognizing that in different spaces, different aspects of your identity might harm you more than others. And depending on what that is, I think that being mindful of then when it comes to equity on all levels and for any type of oppressed group matters and is significant, comes into play when you're talking about mental health as well as the impact of that for different groups. So I think from a cultural perspective, especially like looking at it from the aspect of race, within some races and some cultures, mental health language is lacking.
Right.
Whether it's even considered to be legitimate is a whole other topic. With some, the spiritual aspect and the view of religion and how that intersects with mental health is also very frayed. And I think being able to recognize as well, like how is your reality just also shaped by these different aspects of your identity as well? Because I think we were talking a bit before about like some of the different people that come through some of these programs looking for mental health supports, and within your small bubble, right? If you've never heard some of these words be used or used in a positive way or an encouraging way, or everybody else who has spoken about their mental health has been demonized behind closed doors, and you don't want to be one of those other individuals, so you keep it to yourself. And I think that's the aspect of you don't even realize who all else is in the room with you when you make certain comments and things, because I think that's a big aspect of it as well, is just being able to recognize how so many aspects of people's identities might not always come to the forefront if a space is not deemed as safe by them as well. So even when things like some of the obvious as well as when looking at like the socioeconomic factors, of course, being able to access mental health care is pricey. So for most people, that aspect of already associating a $150 per session visit or upwards kind of thing is not necessarily accessible to them.
Right.
So that's already out the door for a lot of people. For other individuals, when it comes to, again, like the aspect of location, you might be in a small town where perhaps there's the aspect of confidentiality that might be a concern. You don't want everyone knowing your business.
Yeah.
So, it's like that person might have been the mailman's cousin's sister, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
you know, there's those kinds of barriers as well. But I think there's also the aspect too of, on the flip side, is not everybody's story is the same. I think oftentimes, as many people might be aware, that there's, for a lot of racialized people, there can be a lot of stigmas around accessing mental health care. But at the same time, that's not everybody's story. Some people are very, very open with that and seeking those opportunities if they're available to them as well. So I think even just that aspect of recognizing how unique mental health is, and as well the treatments as well that might be available to individuals too, makes tackling it less of a burden. And I think seeing it as more of something that can be collaborated on with many different people addressing it, and these kinds of conversations as well being really important and playing a role in being able to address a lot of the stigmas around just discussing it in general. So
right. Yeah. Just having conversations helps so much.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So as we layer on intersectionalities, there's also the lived experiences, the unique lived experiences that women go through with milestones throughout their life. So whether it's pregnancy or childbirth or menopause. So how do those transitions, or in your experience, have you seen those transitions impact mental health for women? And are there certain strategies that you've seen work well to support them in those times?
For sure, yeah. So I think one of the aspects of that is definitely looking at the lack of support that individuals may feel or just have access to during those times. I think that depending on the culture or experience, for a lot of individuals during those specific life transitions, such as like giving birth and all of that, you have a lot of support that's rallied around you. I know during the pandemic, for a lot of individuals, birthing experiences were extremely traumatic because whatever support, even if you weren't guaranteed that support, at least you knew that perhaps you might be able to access it somehow, whether through paid service or being able to access some type of like community group or something of that nature, or even just being around people in like a third space kind of setting at the mall or something like a drop-in at the library. But I think just the aspect of not necessarily having guaranteed supports during a lot of these life transitions can really be a challenge for a lot of people, because it adds on to that feeling of isolation, which is really interesting because I think, again, when you're sharing stories and hearing people's experiences, you recognize how similar we are. And I was talking about that earlier as to, for me, that's just like one of the joys of getting to do a lot of this kind of work, is just, again, regardless of whether the people look like you or have the same lived experiences, you recognize that there's that shared aspect of what exactly we're all looking to get out of life at a lot of levels. And I think that that's one of the things when it comes to all of these life transitions, is a big part of it is the feeling of connectedness, and also knowing that you aren't the first person to go through these things, and some of the challenges that you're experiencing are not the first to be had as well when it comes to like going through life and everything too. So even that aspect of mentorship, right, is a big thing. Not everyone necessarily, whether it's within your family system or within your friends, has had individuals go through certain life experiences. So being able to hear the wisdom of others who have gone through it, whether older than you, provide that and be that person for those younger than you as well, also plays a really big role in how people experience those life transitions, and also being able to even curb, I think, some of the fears that come with some of these transitions as well. Because I know for me, hearing my cousins and aunties and different things talk about some of these transitions and their learnings has really helped me, I think, remove any fears that I hear a lot of other people have, just because they've heard it spoken about in such a singular and perhaps negative or harmful way. So yeah.
Mentorship all comes back to mentorship. Yeah. I think that you had mentioned kind of those like the positive things that like when you have a baby, for instance, and you have all these people rally around you, and there's all these different instances that, you know, people with uteruses have and they go through. And so I remember, you know, when I was in elementary school and some of my friends were getting their periods ahead of me, and even just like some of the stories that I would start to tell myself of what's going on with me. Why didn't I have my period? And then like when I got my period and I was like, oh my God, what's going on with me? Like, why do I have my period and my other friends don't have their period and all this stuff? And now that's even translated to things like, I mean, so like when folks, you know, have a baby or are trying to get pregnant and want a baby, and then like their friends are pregnant, and then you're like, I'm happy for you, but I'm sad for me. And I'm, you know, or like just all these different things. And then going into menopause where perimenopause and premenopause, and there's all these different other menopauses that exist that folks are like, some women are starting to hit it, like that I know of anyways. Like, and I mean, obviously all women are hitting it at different times, but like some folks who are like within my age range are starting to deal with some of those things. And it's really, really isolating to think that something is wrong with your body or something is different, and then you don't hear people talking about it. So having these conversations and talking about things, I think also that women just haven't been studied for a very long time, like medically speaking. And so we're lacking so much evidence and different situations that like, you're not broken. It's just that the system has been broken for a very long time and you're just a very special case.
Well, and so much of the life stage pieces are related to hormones, right? And then they show up, that affects your mental health in a big way where, you know, especially with childbirth, because I mean, me and you both went through it during the pandemic, so we can totally relate to that one. Yeah, you just don't know what you don't know. And like, it's your first time being a mom. And so you don't know if this is normal, if all the feelings you're feeling are normal or not. It's all new. So it's so wild how much your body changes. They say it takes your body 2 years to go back to its original state after having a child, 2 whole years. But yet you only get a 6-week checkup. And that's
like,
it.
You good? You're not depressed? Good.
Yeah. You know? So it's wild. And then menopause and all that stuff. Like, no one who knows, are you supposed to talk about that? If you're going through that at work, like, there's not really support. It's not like championing you on. Like, they can tell you're pregnant. They know that. They can support you in different ways. Whereas menopause, it's not like you're telling everybody and they're going to know that you're going through these things and able to support you. So very interesting things that we as women have to navigate. And
tough times out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting better though.
No, for sure. And I think like that's why for myself as like a younger woman, I've been a lot more intentional about seeking both the advice, but also like I think the information that's being put out there by women at different stages in their lives. Like people who are just putting out stories on the internet, like whether like social media pages or like different things about what life is like, just like everyday, you know, like sourdough making, like like types of things, and just like people going through their lives, because I think you might underestimate how much just you navigating, you know, at your stage of life just shares a lot of information about what's possible. Because I think that's the aspect too, is for me being able to see women who are still involved in community, still doing side quests, like having podcasts and like all these things, and raising children and families and all these types of things. Like, it's like, okay, you can do all of those different types of things, and you don't necessarily have to sacrifice your interests or even think that you might not have new interests. Or I think that was an aspect too for me, thinking like, okay, so, you know, does this just kind of stop in the sense of like pursuing certain ideas and different things at different stages of your life, right? And when you're able to see people doing it and still pursuing all of these different types of things, it's really exciting. So I think, I'm happy to be here. That's the aspect
in
of that.
Conclusion.
Yes, in conclusion.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah. I've also never heard it called side quest versus
Me too.
like
I was like, I got that too. I was like, ooh, I like that.
Side quest. I never call Raise Her anything like a side hustle, because I'm like, I hate that. I hate the hustle culture. Like, I mean, as much as I probably feed into it a lot, but side quest, I'm like, it's just entirely, I feel like I have like a shield and like a sword, and we're just like going to battle.
And a quest is empowering, right?
Totally.
Like, I think of like Paper Bag Princess.
Yes.
Right?
So exactly.
Like on a quest, a mission to save the world.
100%. Yeah. And I think that very much, like, if somebody asked me to describe the stage of life I'm in and like my career adventures and all those kinds of things, like I would very much call it, like like quests, like a bunch of side quests that have a common thread that I'm still trying to discover, but it's made possible because I keep seeing amazing people who are doing those types of things as well. I'm like, okay, we can do that.
I can do that.
Possible. Yeah.
Good for you.
On our side quests.
Yes. Love it.
What role does societal pressure play in shaping expectations around these life transitions and impact on mental well-being?
I think the only other thing I might just add to that is I think just, again, the pressure that we place on ourselves. Again, when you don't see individuals who are breaking out of traditional molds, you feel like you have to adhere to certain timelines of how you're supposed to show up. When you don't, inevitably, especially because of how rigid workplaces can be, sometimes just your life circumstances might not allow you to have certain types of flexibility to be able to go on side quests. Again, it's a privilege to be able to explore so many different things at my age, I would say, and be able to learn through community, but then also like informal settings. I think that that aspect as well of just like the pressures that we place on ourselves and those boxes and timelines can just add a lot of stress, and the stress of expectation as well. And just like the disappointment, that cycle, and what we say to ourselves when we're going through those cycles of failure, because we set the bars wildly high for ourselves, and not necessarily high in like a positive, ambitious kind of way, but like more so just in a way that's set up for us to fail because of so many different factors that might be placed in our lives. So I think it's just that aspect too of just managing expectations is a big part, but also from the aspect of ourselves, I think, and how we view that. Because from the societal standpoint, I would say that in a lot of ways as well, there's so much that can be done, but a lot of it is out of the hands of individuals. It's more so like now you're looking at it from like more of a policy standpoint and those sorts of things, which also have a huge role to play. But I think as individuals, just because of the way that our society is set up, we focus so much on our little piece of the world and not necessarily recognizing how much of a collective effort is needed to address these issues. So
yeah, totally.
We all need to address it.
Yeah. So addressing trauma is essential, obviously, in mental health care. So how does your organization approach trauma-informed care, specifically tailored to women's experiences?
So I think that when it comes to trauma-informed care, a big aspect of it when recognizing that, I think for our organization is like online therapy unit. So the courses are self-guided, but then they have the therapist support, and the therapists come with a range of experiences that they have within our team in terms of understanding and being familiar with specific issues, but also having generalized understandings of how different experiences and traumatic life experiences may influence how individuals respond to therapeutic practices. So I think a big part of it in terms of therapists being able to connect with clients on a regular basis and really understand and provide them with insightful feedback is for them having that understanding of what's at play, and like really taking the time to ask meaningful questions and really connect with individuals as they're going along their journey of being part of the program. On the other hand as well, I think that a big part of it too is making sure that individuals are matched up with the right services that they're seeking. So beyond just our program as well, in terms of trauma-informed services and things that are available as well, for a lot of individuals in terms of their need, it's a reform in mental health care services in our province and in our country overall. The needs of individuals are oftentimes extremely complex when they're seeking services and that sort of thing. And oftentimes by the time individuals are coming to seek services through that kind of method where it's self-guided and things like that, you're looking at something that might be or might have been addressed in a different way before it even got to the level of them experiencing such distress because of their mental health issues. So perhaps coming back to that aspect of supports in life transitions and things like that, had they had those supports, would they necessarily be experiencing what we're facing now? Or for some individuals, for a lot of individuals actually, financial stress is a really big thing that they're experiencing. How is financial stress connected to being a woman? Well, there's podcast episodes on the Scaries about that one, right? Like, I think that's a huge aspect of it. Yeah. So when you start to look at it like that, I think you peel back the layers and you recognize that although there's, of course, like some of the more commonly understood ones, like such as going through sexual assaults or things of that nature that are, again, like more on the physical side or instances of those natures, that is a separate category in the sense of really understanding like the impact of trauma from that perspective. But then there's also the aspect of traumas from things that are more of the societal level as well, and recognizing the role in terms of prevention and like understanding how individuals get to the point of it really impacting their mental health, recognizing that it can start so much earlier. When it comes to that, trauma informed is oftentimes after it's already happened. But what's happening in terms of even the prevention of those traumas in the first place, I think there's kind of those aspects as well, where when it comes to mental health care, oftentimes, I think our role is that end aspect of receiving individuals after they've already experienced a lot of those things within their life. But then, just understanding, I think, the aspect of what could be done beforehand as well is a role that when it comes to whether therapists or even just other individuals that are on our team or other people just outside of the mental health care industry as well, just like really understanding how traumas are actually interlaced within everyday life more than we might actually realize as well. So.
Wowza. Very complex. I didn't even think about that. But like, yeah, there's not just the trauma after it's happened, but how can we contribute to preventing the trauma from happening at all? And a lot of it is societal and, residential schools and truth and reconciliation, so many things, so deep, systematic, policy driven things that like, how do we, it can't just be this healthcare industry or the mental health industry. Like it is a massive undertaking to address and change. And wow.
So looking at some of those pre-things, the pre-trauma, if you will, some of those stressors, how do gender disparities in general contribute to stressors affecting women's mental health?
When it comes to the gender disparities, it's starting from childhood for sure. Like I think that the way in which, girls are introduced to caregiving roles and really being able to look at the world from outside how you're experiencing it plays a really big role in just the stressors that we experience throughout our lives. So you grow up, for example, already feeling that your responsibility is to look beyond yourself and really be taking in the world from your responsibility to other people. That disconnectedness from yourself is very difficult to gain back over time, I would say. And when it comes to, again, like identity aspects and considering race as being one of them from my own perspective, I think then coming back to it as an adult and really trying to put the pieces back together of understanding like, okay, what does this mean for me through now my lived experience as a Black woman or whatever other identities might be tacked onto that as well. I think that aspect of then just understanding how that differs between different genders or people of different gender expressions plays a huge role. When it comes to some of the stressors, I think that, again, like a really big part of it is more so on the day-to-day level. How resilient are you to some of these things that you're experiencing? Because I don't think necessarily that for a lot of individuals, it's the absence of certain stressors is what's impacting a lot of their experiences on day-to-day level. But oftentimes it's like, how do you cope with some of them? Because what might seem like such a minor instance to one individual might blow up somebody else's entire world. But being 100%. Able to maintain that resilience and develop that, I think, is a really big difference between individuals. And when it comes to even being able to develop that resilience from a young age in terms of like disparities in that kind of aspect, I think that being able to develop the language, I think is a strength for a lot of women. We don't necessarily realize that because I think sometimes it can go to the wayside of we have so much language to describe things that it can almost feel overwhelming, whether overwhelmed by trying to use the therapy speak on ourselves or really be like on the internet trying to diagnose what exactly we're feeling. And I think across the Western culture, that's also like a big challenge as well, is like everything kind of being seen from that clinical lens. Whereas for some of these things, these are human experiences that we're going through. But again, the lack of discussion, the lack of understanding can lead to it feeling like it is this whole clinical issue that cannot be understood by any other thing aside from getting very specialized mental health care. So I think that aspect too of the stressor is definitely being related to your level of exposure to being able to cope with them, how you see other people cope with them in your day-to-day life as well, play a really big part in it too. And I think that we do ourselves a big disservice by just having women in just such a small box and not being able to see the different ways in which women are not only addressing some of those mental health issues and coping with them, but also building up systems to be able to take care of themselves and do it well too. So I think those are some big pieces of it. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not necessarily setting ourselves up for success in terms of society as a whole, setting women up and everyone, but yeah.
Are there things like getting into, taking this into everyday life, into the workplace setting? Are there specific things in your experience or that you've been suggesting through your programs that policies, workplace interventions that organizations can put in place to support employees?
I think one of the things that we brushed on a little bit was the aspect of mentorship as well, and really having people be able to speak more openly about their experiences and how things have been for them navigating their careers. I think that does wonders for people even knowing what's available to them. When you see older women or people of other experiences talk about how they navigated, for example, entering parenthood, navigating what it means to be a caregiver and still be in the workplace and functioning. I think that opens up opportunity to discuss what's possible, but also create a workplace environment that's flexible as well, that allows for, the deliverables to be achieved while still making room for humanity within those spaces too. So I think that's been a really huge part. What that looks like policy-wise, of course, is going to be unique depending on the industry and, what exactly your focus is. But I think being able to even recognize that it's important to have before it becomes an issue, whether again with individuals, but also on the deliverable side. They're both going to be impacted if the people that are providing whatever service or whatever it is are not well.
Right.
So I think denying that has issues of its own, but being able to confront it head on and also demonstrate as well, not from like a, I don't want to say backbiting kind of way, but like almost like in the sense of doing it from a disgruntled kind of way. Like, I guess we'll let you go. I guess like you can take the day off or those types of things. But really recognizing as well and actually believing that when my people are well, everybody wins, right?
Yeah.
And I think that has a really huge impact on it as well. Pay aspect is going to continue pay women what they're worth. Like, I think, yeah, like that's one aspect that, you know, is always going to be at the forefront as well. At the end of the day, when individuals don't have the resources to empower themselves, their options are limited in terms of even being able to use the resources that they do have to invest in the things that would help them be able to manage their responsibilities. So I think that's always going to be front and center. And unfortunately, until that's addressed, a lot of these other things are going to feel like band-aids on top of a dam and waterfall of whatever it is, and until you have the resources in the hands of individuals who need it to be able to cope with especially the rising living costs that we're dealing with right now. So.
Yeah. Outrageous. You had talked about the I guess I'll give you a day off thing. This is just a little bit of a sidebar, but I've seen so many things on TikTok. I'm not sure if you guys have seen them, where the millennial manager like answering things. So it's like there's like the boomer showing up to work, like the boomer manager who's like, well, I think that you need to like be in the office and do this and whatever else. Anyways, and then the millennial one, which is Skylar and I are probably like zillennials. Like we're like, you know, Gen Zs at heart, but really millennials. And they're like, oh, your heart hurts today? Absolutely. Take the week. That's totally fair. And like, you know, I'll cover for you. It's not a big deal. I'll do all your, like, that's just like how I think, because we face the exact opposite of that, especially coming into the workforce and like dealing with managers and folks, not all the time, obviously, but people who are like, these are the policies and this is the way it is. And we don't care that you're a human. So like, we almost like overcorrect and we're like, oh, baby, sweet baby angel, it's okay. I mean, I know how I manage, which is probably not the greatest way, but I'm always like, oh my God, no, absolutely. That's absolutely fine. It's great. Take a mental health day, take a mental health month. Anyways.
But yeah, bottom line is there needs to be supports in place, right? That recognize mental health. I used to work at a place that had a room. It was like a mental health room that you could go and like if you were having a bad day and
just go like scream,
or like cry or whatever. So you didn't have to go to the bathroom. You could go to like a room, but it was like there was like no windows. It was like you were like in an insane asylum room, like padded walls.
Would you say that there's like any like stigma attached with using the room,
I mean, I never went in there, but yeah, for sure. Like walking into that room, I forget what it was labeled, but it was, there was like a specifically meant, it was like a quiet room or like I don't know, but yeah, it was meant to be like a,
if you wanted to go cry. But then if you saw someone walking in there, were you like,
exactly.
Yeah,
right? Like that's
what's happening? How's their day going? Yeah.
But I like that you brought that up though, because I think that even in the aspect too of like just how then you actually view yourself and being able to speak up for yourself, right? And like ask for what you need when it's being received from that perspective. I think that it makes things extremely challenging to feel like it's worth even pursuing that route. Then also at the same time as well, like it's just been really, really interesting, I think, to just see more and more people start to recognize that it's also a reflection of how you are viewing yourself and like what you're able to give yourself. If that's how you're responding to individuals as well, because it goes both ways, right? In the sense of, okay, like, so that person's taking time off. Do you feel that you don't also have the same access to be able to take that? Or, you know, and you can't necessarily always be asking your management that. This is not a professional workplace advice or anything like that. But it is interesting. And I think that's why I appreciate the great leaders that I've been able to have so far throughout my career, but also just like as a volunteer, as in like a person in the community as well, because I'm seeing them demonstrate that it's okay to listen to yourself and to take that time, and they make it okay. So you know, you kind of follow suit, and that's been really great as well. And also like that other aspect too of not necessarily wanting to inflict the same harms that you experience on other people. There's something to be said about wanting to be like, okay, like I went through this experience that was extremely harmful in terms of work or whatever it was. What can you take from that and learn to be able to change the way in which you now deal with people as a result of what you experienced? So very, very interesting stuff in the workplace.
Oh yeah, tons. as we wrap up, I can't believe it's already been an hour. This is wild. But as we wrap up, just wondering from your perspective, how sharing some advice with our listeners, from your perspective, how they can best support themselves and others experiencing mental health challenges.
I think that recognizing the power that you have to be able to be a mental health support for the individuals that are around you is one half of it. I think not necessarily feeling like it's out of your power to be that sounding board for individuals, to be able to provide support and be a good person to other people in your life, and, be able to create space for conversations around mental health and some of the challenges that come out of that. I think on the other hand as well, recognizing what limitations there might be, both for individuals in your life, but also for yourself, and understanding where it might be time to include other individuals, maybe with more experience. And that might be professional, that might be a faith-based leader, that might be a counselor, it might be a whole bunch of different roles. But I think recognizing too that the answers don't just lie in one source, being able to diversify how you experience wellness and the different resources that might be available to you, might be in the form of a program, might be from a whole bunch of different places, but also recognizing too, I think, and maybe this is now 3 parts of advice, but also recognizing as well that just because you have a negative experience, seeking help in one source might just mean that it's not the best for you, but to continue trying. Please continue seeking out the supports that might be the best fit for you, or the ways in which you engage with wellness that might be the best fit for you, because it's necessary and it's needed. And it also might change at different points in your life as well, with all the life transitions or things that you're experiencing as well. And yeah, you deserve it. So go after it, ensure that it's at the forefront of how you're taking care of yourself. So
thank you. That was the best
so
way.
much. You're such a wealth of knowledge. Vibya.
Yeah,
so
always.
Appreciate it. Oh, I love Vibya. She's the
so
best.
great.
Such a wealth of knowledge, and she's just every time I listen to her speak, there's like these gems, these nuggets of like such wisdom, and she's just, I don't know.
She's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and so deeply compassionate.
Yeah. And so deeply committed to the various causes and community groups and everything.
Side quests.
Yes, the side quests. I'm absolutely stealing that as we go forward. Borrowing it.
Yeah.
But what are we going to do about it? What can the government do? What can you do? Well, let us tell you. To address these issues and disparities, employers, government, and us as individuals all play a role. So first, let's look at the government. The federal government can play a critical role by fulfilling its commitment to establish a Canada mental health transfer, allocating resources equivalent to 12% of provincial and territorial health expenditures, with half earmarked for community services. So give us some free mental health support would be great. Additionally, the enactment of a Canada Mental Health and Substance Use Health Act would ensure permanency and accountability in the allocation of resources. Adopting an intersectional gendered approach to mental health care is essential in understanding and responding to the diverse needs of girls, young women, trans women, and non-binary or gender non-conforming individuals, thereby preventing more serious mental health concerns later in life. The government needs to prioritize mental health care investment with the support of committees. On the employer's side, what can they do? Well, first, communicating resources and providing mental health training. Executives, human resources, and other company leaders can demonstrate their dedication to mental well-being for women by sharing resources via email or, intranet or whatever it may be, and investing in programs that support mental health. Next is building mental health into policies, procedures, and even measurement. This includes employee benefits, paid time off, leave, and flexible working hours. And like Vibya said, not making it this, I guess we'll give you a time off, but...
Or making you so busy that if you take time off, you're like never going to be you can't catch up and it's going to screw you over. Like
exactly.
No one should be that busy.
Yeah. And last is fostering flexibility and sustainable ways of working. So as we kind of just said, set respectable after-hour boundaries and realistic workloads. Leading by example will underscore those practices and show employees that they will not be penalized or discriminated against for just taking a little bit of me time or taking a mental health day.
Last but not least, individuals. What can we do to support others and ourselves? Well, one key aspect is the need to challenge those stereotypes. And Vibya talked about that reinforce the stigma, and particularly those affecting women. By speaking out about misconceptions and introducing new information, we can shift beliefs and encourage more open conversations about mental health. It's also essential to advocate for vulnerable groups of women, such as immigrants or those experiencing domestic violence. These individuals often face additional challenges in accessing mental health support, and providing that extra assistance can make a significant difference in their well-being. At the heart of addressing mental health stigma is the encouragement of open dialogue. Men, women, specifically men, because we know that they don't like to share their feelings as much. Starting conversations about mental health can be intimidating, but it's a crucial first step in seeking help. By offering support, understanding, and using resources, we can help women realize that they're not alone in their struggles and that seeking help is a brave and necessary step towards healing. Additionally, promoting self-care practices is essential for women's mental health. Encouraging activities like staying connected with others, pursuing hobbies, finding moments of joy in life, regularly checking in on oneself can really help build resilience and overall well-being. And by collectively working to understand and address the challenges women face in mental health, like we're doing today, we can break down the stigma, broaden access to care, and empower women to prioritize their mental health.
Yeah, make it a priority. Make it a part of something that you talk about.
And it's a daily reminder, honestly. We talked about at the beginning, the definition of mental health, and it's like, nah, nobody's got it. Like, let's be honest. Nobody's perfect. Everybody has mental health concerns and challenges. Every day is a different ride.
Yeah.
So it's that reminder to yourself, that daily check-in, whether it's once a day, several times a day, the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
How am I doing? How do I feel? How has this impacted my day?
Yeah.
What do I need to do different tomorrow? So just have those conversations with yourself, with your kids, with your family, with your friends, and let's just normalize having those conversations.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
it's the biggest piece.
That's one of the biggest parts, is just having the conversations and normalizing it as part of like kind of your everyday thing that you do.
Yes. So that's a wrap for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us today as we confronted this terrifying but real life statistics impacting women and girls all over the world. Please share this episode, rate and subscribe wherever you're listening, and stay tuned for more ways to make a positive impact. Together, we can make the world a little less scary for women and girls.
Heck yeah. And remember to follow us on Instagram at RaiseHerCo and at Scaries.podcast and on TikTok at RaiseHerCo. Remember, change starts with awareness and action, which we are doing here today. Thank you for being a part of the Scaries community and making this world a little less scary to exist as a woman.
Bye.